As young women, we face many issues, from the pressures of social media to the expectation of society. We see how these issues affect us and our mental health every day. But what about men?
In present day, there doesn't seem to be much acceptance for men to talk about their feelings and mental health as much as there is for women.
We want to investigate, and what better than to speak to men? All different kinds of men with different kinds of lives on different issues that affect them, asking all sorts about what it's like being a man.
Suicide is the biggest killer in men aged 20 to 49.
But why aren't we talking about it?
We're going to find out. So we are Hull, Nat and Liv, and today's episode is on lad culture.
I think as women, despite not being men, we definitely see lad culture and we have an idea of what we think it is. I think we definitely conform to the stereotype of how we look at lads.
Yeah.
And looking at the definition of lad culture, it says...
And with this definition in mind, we can definitely say that we feel like we agree and we've experienced this before.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting for us to investigate, because from an outside perspective, we feel like it can be quite peer pressured, and it seems like it really could affect men's mental health. So we want to find out whether guys agree with that too.
Looking at the history of lad culture, it emerged in Britain during the 90s, where laddish attitudes like binge drinking and rowdy behaviour became the norm. We spoke to our expert psychotherapeutic counsellor Debbie Massey about this culture and found out that men are 3 times more likely to be reliant on alcohol or the use of illegal drugs, which in turn could become detrimental to a man's mental health.
I think alcohol in moderation as part of a healthy lifestyle doesn't have to be a problem. It can become a problem when it's being used to self-medicate, that's male or female. It's a depressant, that's an issue as well. So you feel great in the beginning and then you hit that line and you go over it, and you don't feel great. In fact, you feel a whole lot worse. So there is a lad culture. So whether that's binge drinking, which can be quite harmful, or whether it's self-medicating, there does seem to be a lad culture, but we do see that in females as well.
The National Union of Students says that lad culture is particularly influential in the social side of university life, particularly within extracurricular activities and sports.
So we're going to speak to Birmingham City University Sports Societies to see what they think lads are, whether they think they're lads or if they conform to laddish behaviour. I think it would be interesting to see how they differ between each society and which sport is different. Because obviously we have our preconceptions of what we think they will be like.
Like I definitely think that they're going to be laddie. I do, like it's stereotypical, but from my opinion, they're in the sports societies. That's kind of the exact environment where there would be that culture. So that's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, so follow us to see.
What do you think a lad is? What would you say is a lad?
What would you say is a lad?
Yeah, I think it's just like a young male who's outgoing, a bit boisterous maybe.
Someone who's quite cantankerous maybe at times, someone who's boisterous, who's active in sport, who likes to go out and have a drink.
I don't know, someone who has a bit of fun, a bit of laugh.
Someone that drinks heavily.
I guess if you're looking at the stereotypical lad, yeah, that's like someone that does drink a lot, like always bantering with people, like life and soul of the party type of thing.
Enjoys the sesh.
Yeah.
I just always say it's the cool kids at school.
Yeah. Not us.
Yeah. I mean, in the general sense, it's just a boy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
that's true. But now I think lad is like, you know.
It sort of developed its own new meaning.
So, would you say that you are lads?
Would you say that you guys are lads?
Do you think you're lads?
Absolutely not.
To a degree, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Give us that.
Definitely.
I feel like we've all got it in us, like at times, yeah, but not generally.
I'd say so, yeah, just probably.
We're guys, but we're not laddish.
Why would you say that you're not laddish?
I think laddish behaviour is usually a bit questionable.
Yeah.
So.
I think laddish behaviour always sort of stems when it's just a group of guys only.
I think it's sort of a testosterone trying to one-up each other.
Why?
Well, I think I'm a bit of a boisterous person. But, like, I do enjoy going out. I pretty much most weeks, like, it is something I enjoy.
It's almost like a lifestyle you just take on when you join sports societies.
Especially like with rugby and other societies like that.
Do you think that people expect you to be laddish because you play sport, and football in particular?
Do you think people expect you guys to be quite laddish because you play sports, especially rugby?
Do you think people expect you to be laddish because you play a sport?
Yeah, pretty much.
Definitely stereotypes.
I wouldn't say there's a general expectation though. You'd think, someone plays football, or he must be a like Jack the Lad type guy. I don't think that's the general perception. I don't think people think of it that too deep actually. I think what we do have nowadays is a society that's opening up and it's sort of accepting that everyone is sort of different with each other.
Yeah,
definitely.
Rugby definitely has that.
Like I think like if you introduce yourself and you're like, I play rugby, like instantly someone will go, oh yeah, rugby boys, like rugby boys, yeah.
Do you think that's a fair opinion for people to have?
To a degree, like I mean, I've played rugby since I was 5, and I've come across lads, and I've also come across gentlemen. Like there's a very broad spectrum of people who play rugby. So I don't think it's fair to label the person a lad just because they play rugby, but it's a fair assumption to make as well at the same time.
Yeah.
I think if we did a different sport, people would expect us to be more laddish, but because we do rowing, everyone's like very respectful.
Wear blazers.
Yeah,
that kind of thing next.
Yeah, probably think we're all posh.
And also as a sport, it's got less of this kind of culture behind it of, I mean, obviously people still drink, they still party and things, but I think it's just got a lot less of a kind of a stigma kind of thing behind it. Yeah.
So do you host any socials?
Yeah.
So do your socials normally entail like clubbing and drinking?
Yes, definitely.
Do you do any socials that don't include? No?
No, but I would like to change that.
Have you ever had a teammate who doesn't drink?
Yeah, we have loads. We have a couple.
Oh, you do? Yeah. So do you know what your teammates who don't drink think of going to socials that are all, well, not necessarily all surrounded about drinking, but you're surrounded by people who are all drinking?
I think they kind of are used to it, because I've never had anyone complain. They all seem to enjoy the socials that we go out on, and they seem to just join in with everything except from the drinking part of the night out.
Yeah, so like for example, after a match, like we'll have, Dick of the Day and Man of the Match, is what we call it. And if they do something silly in the game or they're really good in the game, it's always like a pint, you have to down a pint or something like that. But for them, we'll just make it like something, maybe say if it's something silly they done during the game, something disgusting with like condiments or like salt and stuff like that. So
has anyone ever pressured anyone to drink when they've not wanted to?
No, if someone says they're not drinking, that's it. Like you want to keep members in the society, and you're not going to keep members by ostracising them and keeping them on the edges of the fringes of the society.
They're still our mates at the end of the day, just because they don't drink doesn't make any difference.
Exactly.
They're still part of the team.
Do you guys host socials?
Yeah.
Is there an expectation on what you guys do in a social? Like, do you have when you're in a big group, do you think you hype each other up more and you drink more because you're with each other?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's definitely a camaraderie, a group vibe where you're sort of pushing each other on to sort of go the distance and, hype yourselves up, get excited for the night. I think there's definitely a part of that, but that's what makes it a great society.
That just makes it good. Like, it's just like, because at the end of the day, it's just everyone having fun. And so obviously when we come together, it's just like just everyone hypes everyone up to drink more, to just for it to be a good night, for the night to be worth it. I don't know why we're eating and stuff.
And to anything, it brings people who are quite shy out more, and you're learning more about the individual, and you're seeing what they don't like, what they do like, and you're sort of growing as a team, you're growing that bond.
There's also a bit of like a confidence boost as well, because like someone like me, I wouldn't really talk much, but then me being on full side, I've actually like gained more confidence as well.
Yeah, so it's just a lot more about like bringing you guys together.
Yeah.
So do you host initiations, and do you agree with them? Do
you as BCU football host initiations?
Initiations, and do you agree with them?
No, we don't. It pushes people away. Like, I don't know like about you guys, but I don't think you would want to join something if you have to do something horrible. Just join it.
Initiations is a tricky subject because the reason it's done is to bring the team together.
Yeah.
And I've been in teams where like that is the point where you make all your new friends from the teams that you're new playing with. But then also it is quite ridiculous what some initiations.
Yeah, like other universities, like I'm sure you've seen it in the headlines, like they've done some ridiculous things. I mean, people have died from them. Like that's where it goes too far, in my opinion. Like
we don't really do initiations, but like I guess you could call it like little challenges. So like, like you sing a song for after your first game, like on the bus home or something, or.
But it's like nothing like forced to, like if people feel really uncomfortable, like usually it's just like leave it to the next person, whoever, like if they really don't want to do it, people just don't do it.
Yeah.
No, we do not. No, we don't. We never have either. But I don't know, it's one of those things, it depends what the initiation is, because you hear all of these horror stories. I kind of see it as a good thing in a sense of kind of getting people involved, but I think there is definitely a line. And I mean, you shouldn't be bullying people essentially with it, but you know, getting people to kind of bond by doing this sort of kind of welcome to the club sort of thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, done in the right way.
Is lad culture just banter, or is it harmful?
Is it just banter, or is it harmful?
Do you think it's just banter, or do you think it could be harmful?
I think the intention is always banter, but I mean, there is always that line, isn't there?
Yeah, same with initiations. It's meant to be fun and bonding with your friends, but it can get too far, definitely.
Yeah.
I think it starts off with intentions of banter, but sometimes it can become harmful. I think the line can be crossed a lot within like the stereotypical lad culture, and some people's line is different from another person's lines.
I think it's mainly banter, it's intended to be all banter, and like obviously nothing too serious. But I guess in certain situations, it could get harmful.
We sort of adapt to each other. We all adapt to each other. We know each other's limits. You know, you grow like in the socials. We all learn about each other. We learn about what we don't like, and you saw if someone's not so confident, you're not going to put them under pressure.
Would you feel comfortable to cry in front of your teammates?
Yeah, I would not before though. Definitely not before. Like, I would say within the last year, I would say I would be more comfortable with it, but before, definitely not.
So would you feel comfortable talking to one of your teammates about your mental health?
Yeah, I feel like I do.
I wouldn't really, to be honest. I've always been like a closed book. Like that's the way I like to keep my emotions. Like just they're my problem, like not someone else's.
Yeah. I feel like I'm personally just a very emotional guy. So I've cried in front of my mates. Obviously, it just depends on how close I am to them, because usually you start a conversation and stuff like that and but I don't really know. But I feel like it's just me being quite an emotional guy.
I don't know. I don't think I'd be comfortable because I don't really like crying in front of people anyway. And
it depends on the reason. I might try and hold it back. It depends who I'm in front of as well. But I mean, as Eddie said, you know,
if you need to, and if you're with the right friends, yeah.
It was really interesting to hear what rugby, football and rowing had to say, and how although they're all sports teams, they gave us lots of different opinions.
Hi!
Hi!
Hey!
So that's not what I was expecting. I think it's so shocking how they don't do initiations, because that's something that I associate so heavily with lad culture, especially sports teams. So the fact that they do have, you know, challenges and games at their socials, but you don't have to do them, it's not pressured, it's not forced, I think is really cool, because I was expecting to see groups of lads who were really quite peer pressured, you know, pushing each other and egging each other on, but that's not what we saw at all. It was way more about being a team and a family and supporting one another, which I think is just really awesome, because when we first went into this, I definitely had more of a negative opinion of what I expected to get from it, and I definitely didn't see that.
Well, I think it was very interesting that some of the guys didn't think they were lads. So especially rowing, as they said, like when we said we thought they were lads, they laughed at us. Because although they don't show stereotypical laddish behaviour, we would still class them as lads. And even though rugby agreed they were lads, they said they were, they said there was a difference between being a lad and then living up to like lad culture, which I just didn't consider. So I think lad culture it's not necessarily a bad thing until they push it too far.
However, you know, hearing that these socials only rely on alcohol, and you know, after hearing that statistic from Debbie at the beginning of our episode that men are 3 times more likely to rely on alcohol and illegal drugs, you know, it really comes into play here. That idea that, you know, you need alcohol to have fun. However, you know, what was really nice and, you know, shows a lot of hope is that they're trying to change that. They're trying to bring in different new ways of, you know, bonding as a team. So after hearing, you know, university sports teams at the source of lad culture, we now want to speak to someone else at a similar age that goes against this stereotype. We travel to Cheshire to speak to Harry Johnson, a 19-year-old who very openly shares his life and his feelings online. We found him through an online interview after being praised for the work he is doing that breaks lad culture stigmas.
One day I was in a coffee shop with my mate and boom, I had a panic attack. And then from that day I developed panic disorder. Kind of like the acute part of it kind of died off, and then I went into more general anxiety. And then obviously that kind of, a byproduct of that was depression. And then in the last sort of 3 months I've been diagnosed with ADHD. So that was obviously a pre-existing condition. I set up the Compassion Initiative about 6 months ago. I first shared my story in the hopes that that would get other people to share their stories, which it did. So I think there's definitely a pressure for men to act in a certain way in order to avoid getting hurt. I know this is just like a different one. There's definitely pressures for men in terms of physicality, like massively. Like I've always grown up as a skinny person and I've always felt I need to be big. And there's been times in my life where I've met that criteria, where I've eaten so much and I've been gymming so much. But I don't think there's any real satisfaction with that beyond social credibility. Like in my experience, I think it's more of just you feel a need. I don't know, for me it was a need to not be skinny, but I guess for a lot of guys it's a need to be skinnier. Like it varies from person to person, but I'd say the reality of lad culture is different to how we understand lad culture. Because I think people, as you say, act in accordance to labels. When I was in a bad place, I don't know, getting out and drinking and stuff, it was just the escape. I think there is this idea that men are supposed to just kind of get on with things. Men feel that if they don't act in accordance to that image, then they're somehow lesser a man maybe. And if that's all men are to feel they are, and it's what the standard they feel they should live up to, I don't think that's very healthy or sustainable in a modern society.
It was really interesting to hear Harry's view on lad culture and the pressures that men face to conform to this.
Hi!
Hey!
Hi!
So from meeting with sports societies and Harry Johnson, we got a broad range of views about lad culture and how it affects them in today's society. And we thought it was so important that we got these perspectives from young men. So going into Harry's interview, we didn't think that he would be a typical lad. As to us, he doesn't portray those typical laddish behaviour.
Yeah, but actually, you know, from speaking to the BCU societies, we got the impression that it isn't so unusual for boys to talk about their problems. We just don't see it as women. But then why would we? You know, going into Harry's interview, he goes against these massive stereotypes, but that's just because it's public. Whereas with the sports teams, they just talk about it amongst themselves. More of them said they would open up or do open up than we ever expected, even admitting they'd cry in front of their friends. And despite this, we still call them lads.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that goes to show that one of the main things that we learned was that there's actually a massive difference between being a lad and conforming to lad culture. When we spoke to the BCU societies, they agreed that it is just banter, but when it's pushed too far, it can affect a man's mental health. But they don't cross this line. Lad culture is a stereotype of extreme laddish behaviours, but actually, most lads nowadays don't actually conform to that.
On the next episode, we investigate masculinity and its stereotypes. Follow us as we speak to a range of different men and what being masculine means to them.